Hey, how's it going again, class? This is Mr. Miles coming at you with another podcast. Let me get this Windows Journal open. And today what we're going to be talking about, plant reproduction. And again, reproduction is something that is very important because without reproduction, we would not have life. So let's talk about all those pretty little flowers and how we get more of them. They don't just magically appear. I know, surprising, right? Now, in plants, and hopefully you're following along on page 111, is they go through two different stages in their life. So they have, we have something called a life cycle. And they actually have two different stages. They'll go through, one of the stages is called a sporophyte stage. And the other stage they're going to go through is called a gametophyte stage. So sporophyte stage and gametophyte stage. Now, it's pretty easy to figure out exactly what they produce throughout these different stages. Now, sporophyte, obviously, it's going to produce, to make more plants, spores. That's what it does. It just creates spores. And you look right here, sporo, and it tells you spores. And then phyte actually means plant. So that'll help you with those. Now, gametophyte, it produces something called gametes. No, it does not produce games. Some people were wondering. Now you may ask, what is a gamete? Well, a gamete is simply a sex cell, and the best way to think of sex cells is you have two that you can think of. It's sperm and egg. Now when we're dealing with plants, whenever we're referring to sperm, we're referring to pollen, and egg stays the same. So you're going to get like the male part, the sperm, and then the female part, the egg, and that falls under gametophyte. Now, again, if you're looking at page 111, you can see that you'll have a plant, and it'll go through a stage in its life where it is a sporophyte. And as it's a sporophyte, like we said, it's going to produce spores to make more plants. Now, these spores can turn into male parts or male plants and female. Because we know of a few plants that are, both male and female, but you get some plants that are just strictly male or strictly female. Well, again, as we know, male produces pollen, and inside that pollen is contained the sperm, and the female is going to produce the egg, and that's going to stay inside of the ovary, as we learned. Now, these two are going to get together. They're going to get married, have kids, and all that stuff. No, they're going to get together. You're going to have a fertilized egg. So the sperm is going to go into the egg. It's going to fertilize it. And then you're going to start all over with a zygote. And we'll talk about that in a second. And that zygote will eventually become a new sporophyte plant. So flowers that do this, a year, so like in the first part of the year they become a sporophyte, and then the second part of the year they'll go through a gametophyte stage, is we call those annuals. So they'll start off as a sporophyte the beginning of the year, and then by the end of the year they will go into gametophyte stage, and they have their seeds, so then the next year they can go into that. Now the next one you'll get biennials. Now biennials means the first year they'll spend the whole time as a sporophyte, and the second year they'll spend as a gametophyte, and then they'll start all over again. So, bi means what? Two. And then that should just kind of give it away. And then annuals, annually. You have your birthday annually. That's once a year. And then the last one we're going to get, we're going to call them perennials. And perennials, simply, it means that they are just more than two. They wanted to make it easy and not give you, triennials and quadrennials and stuff like that. But perennials just means more than two. Okay, so let's get into how this works. So, simply, as we said before, you take the egg, you take the pollen, and again, remember the pollen has a sperm in it. You put them together, you have a process called fertilization. Now, when you have fertilization, so that's when the pollen, the sperm, goes inside the egg, you have fertilization occurs, and the first thing you're going to make is something called a zygote. A zygote simply will just become, for the young plant, an embryo. They all have such fun little names. This probably drives you insane. No, you don't call it a baby plant, not yet. But the egg and the pollen, right when they meet together, they're a zygote, and then it becomes the embryo, which is the immature plant. You know, he tells fart jokes and stuff like that. No, I'm just kidding. Just the embryo is just the immature plant waiting to grow. Now, quickly, let's talk about the two different types of growing we have with the gymnosperms and angiosperms. So remember, first we have the gymnosperms. And gymnosperms means naked seeds. And the first thing they have to do is they have to do something called cone production. So pretty much what they're doing is they're making these cones, and you'll have male and female. So you have male and female, and they need to get together, and they need to have pollination. Then from pollination, we have fertilization, and don't worry, I'll go back over these steps. And from fertilization, you have seed development. And finally, we have seed dispersal. So let's talk about these. So first is cone production. You actually have to make the male parts and the female parts. You need to make the sperm, you need to make the eggs. Once we have those, we can transfer the male over to the female part. Remember, the female egg, it's going to stay where it's at, but you bring the male part over to the female part. That is what you have with pollination. Now, these things don't have flowers, so they don't have those bright, wonderful things, you know, especially if you're thinking of pine trees. So if they don't have anything bright, anything to attract insects, is it going to be animal or is it going to be wind pollinated? Correct, wind pollinated. So it's going to have the male pollen go over to the female. It's going to be pollination once it gets there. Then, once they actually meet and the sperm goes inside the egg, you're going to have a process called fertilization occurring. And then we're going to have the seed development, so that little tiny embryo is going to turn into a seed and then stay inside there. And then we need to disperse it because it can't grow on top of the parent. It needs to go out and get a job and go somewhere else. So your parents probably are waiting for you to disperse. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is we just talked about gymnosperms. Because remember, gymnosperms, because they are naked seeds, their process is going to be a little bit different. Then we're going to deal with the angiosperms. And because they're flowering plants, because they make these very attractive flowers to get their attention, we know the process. They have to make this. They have to make the egg. They have to make the pollen. But then after that, we're going to run into the process of, again, pollination. Into the process of pollination, where they're attracting insects and making them go to different places. And then again, we deal with fertilization. If you're wondering about this is on page 116. Now, how this works is you have, so here's our the female part. And what's the female part again? What's it called? If you said pistil, you are correct. Well, in here again, you have that opening, and it goes all the way down. And the great, grand, and wonderful thing is down inside here sits the egg. Now, the sperm will find its way, go all the way down, process of fertilization. So when it gets here, that's called pollination. It's going to go all the way down, that's called fertilization. And then as it's in there, it's going to start to grow. Now, in angiosperms, something special that happens with them is it doesn't just grow into a seed. It'll grow into a fruit or a nut. And a fruit or nut, it pretty much just contains the seed. And they serve as protection for them. And also, they serve as a way for seed dispersal. Because something comes, they eat the fruit, and then they poop out the seed somewhere else. And so you get this nice, wonderful coat of fertilizer for the little seed that's put inside the fruit, and also gets to be brought to different places because it's not going to eat and then poop immediately. The animal will wander off somewhere else and then release the seed in its wonderful fertilizer wherever it needs to be. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how plants try to take over the world. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And then, yeah, remember, test later this week. It'll be a fun one. So until next time, take care.